As ever, John Watson with me here in the commentary booth. John, this morning, the first time the Williams wasn't fastest this year.
Yes, indeed, and really, I think it's a follow-on to what we saw in Monte Carlo when Ayrton Senna managed to just beat Nigel Mansell in those dramatic few laps at the end of the Monaco Grand Prix. Well, the result of that is that the two cars, Berger and Senna, have been consistently quick, and just as I said, that Ayrton Senna has now managed to put himself onto that provisional pole. Time when 1 minute around the circuit, coming down under the bridge into this tight right-left chicane. Well, there's Schumacher and Patrese both going very slowly indeed. Both look as if they've been beginning out laps. Schumacher now coming under the chicane, through the chicane. Morbidelli, he had a little shunt very early in the morning session. Coming down to the final hairpin bend, this is the corner we now see Schumacher coming into. Morbidelli popped it into the left, into that player sign, took the left front corner off the car. No more serious damage than that. So there's a spinner again, one of the two Dallaras. We can't see who it is. I don't know why they spin there, Allard, because that is a really nice corner. It's a third gear corner. You've got to be careful with the throttle coming out of the corner. You take fourth gear, you tend to short shift into fourth gear. You've seen about 5 or 6 people spin there this morning.
Well, and Pierluigi Martini spun about 5 times on his own, I think, this morning, and the car still having tendency to want to jump off the circuit. Both drivers not very happy with the performance of that Dallara chassis. Michael Schumacher ended with one of the cars in the gravel, but you can't deny the man's not trying.
Well, very impressive Schumacher this morning. Outside of the top two teams, the Williams and the McLaren, Schumacher was 5th quickest. His time 1 minute 21.445. We expect Schumacher to be able to improve upon that, because so far in this session, in this now official time session, everybody has improved upon the times they did in the morning session. And of course, at a circuit like Montreal, really, it's no different to a road circuit, a street circuit, such as Adelaide, such as Monte Carlo. It's not used frequently, and there's a lot of dirt, dust, lack of rubber. It's not a regular racetrack. And it really takes the best part of the 3 days of a Grand Prix to get down any decent amount of rubber. And it's only when that happens that the times really do begin to fall.
The track also being very bumpy. Yesterday, when it was sort of an open road, we did a couple of laps and we didn't think it was going to be that bumpy. When you look at these cars, oh boy.
Well, believe me, it is bumpy, and driving around the passenger car, particularly an American product with its rather sloppy suspension, you soak up all those bumps. But you get into a current front-running Grand Prix car like a Benetton or a Williams, or, well, let's say not the Williams, because
20 mark. Gerhard Berger just improved on his fastest time so far. He's now 4th quickest, a 1:21.791. So we've got both McLarens and both Williams in the top 4.
Well, what is surprising, I think, is that McLaren have come to a circuit which, in my opinion, favoured very much the Williams and probably the Benetton. But McLaren have been working away systematically and really have made big gains.
Michael Schumacher just being 4th, so he's a little quicker than Berger. It's still fastest in Canada for the first official qualifying session for Sunday's Canadian Grand Prix, the 7th round of the Formula 1 World Championship. Nigel Mansell is 2nd fastest. Gerhard Berger just moved up to 3rd place. Riccardo Patrese is in 4th. 5th is Michael Schumacher, and 6th Johnny Herbert. Well, the Canadian Grand Prix, which is being held here since 1978 on the Ile de Notre Dame circuit, which is later called Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, the man who won his very first Grand Prix here, and it was the 1978 Canadian Grand Prix.
Yeah, pretty miserable Grand Prix that was as well. Throughout the weekend it poured with rain. And also it was a Grand Prix where Nelson Piquet made his debut in the Brabham, and of course he went on to win 2 of his 3 World Championships with the Brabham team. Well, fortunately today we've got weather which is very much more comfortable, very much more pleasant. So there's a very strong wind blowing, and again that wind is blowing dust and dirt across the circuit. But at least the temperature, the ambient is high, it's comfortable. It really is just about, I say, ideal, or as good as I've ever seen it on this Lille Notre Dame circuit. And when it's pleasant, it's beautiful, but when it's miserable, well, it is just about the worst place I know to go motor racing.
John Alesi at the moment in 8th place. And Alesi again having had a little spin this morning, laying some rubber on the circuit. But Nigel Mansell being ready to attack Ayrton Senna's pole position time. So far, Gerhard Berger, who improves but doesn't improve position-wise.
Yes, it is now within less than a tenth of a second of Nigel Mansell. And really, to see these two McLarens running as competitively, as strongly, this is the best showing we've had really in 1992 from the team. One thing that is for sure, the work that Honda has been doing with this new V12 engine, we saw beginning to pay dividends, first of all in Imola, then again in Monte Carlo, and now here in the Gilles Villeneuve circuit in Montreal, both on the intermediate, the second intermediate part of the circuit. Senna was quickest at 190 miles an hour, and again Senna was quickest going across the start-finish line at 176 miles an hour.
We were watching Gerhard Berger while Eric Comas nearly went off, coming on to the main straight. Gerhard Berger, who was a little bit quicker than teammate Ayrton Senna at the intermediate point, so we might be looking at a special lap from the Austrian.
But all he needs is traffic just coming down to this final chicane. Montreal, there we are. Well, that is not. This is further around the circuit. It's one of the Brabhams or one of the Tyrrells. Tried to spin it round. You can see the black mark, but he never got it round fully. It was one of the two Tyrrells. We think it's Andrea de Cesaris.
What do you think that?
Well, Andrea's not been doing a lot of spinning these days, but just that little glimpse from the side of the helmet gave me a clue.
Gerhard has improved 0.145. Then the two Williams, Mansell and Patrese. Schumacher, Alesi now moves up to 6th. Johnny Herbert in 7th, Mika Häkkinen in 8th, and Martin Brundle in 9th.
Well, I'm going to reserve judgment on this situation in Canada to be on the pole position, or worse, on the front row of the grid. So this is now Mansell attempting, but not on this lap. This is not going to be good enough. This is just a building lap. Look at that coming out. Just a little bit of oversteer as he came on. So anxious to get his right foot planted into the bulkhead on the throttle pedals.
Well, that's one of the laps to get into the rhythm, warm himself and the car up for that.
McLaren off on the right-hand side. So that's just stopping there just to do something, or whether that is a serious problem. Well, that was Andrea de Cesaris doing a very poor effort at doing a Nigel Mansell donut.
Also on the lazy bike.
Yes, and Stefano Modena really had to get on the anchors to avoid driving into his fellow Italian patriot, I suppose we must call him that. And here we have Nigel coming down 3/4 way through the lap. Third gear exit, picking up the throttle. The car again on the edges of all these right and left. Hard to get the power on the back end of the car, is always wanting to step away from you. It's a balancing act, a juggling act, just to keep the amount of power, the amount of slide in check. At the same time, try and get as much momentum to push the car forward. It's very, very quick. This is coming through there 170 miles an hour. It's lined at the apex. As you look at that flashing past of the two Fond Metals into the final chicane. And now onto the start-finish straight. We're going to wait for a couple more seconds to see, can Nigel Mansell re-establish that record of pole positions that he's had throughout the season?
Well, it hasn't come up on our screen so far. A 1:20.528. It wasn't even faster than his own fastest lap so far. Well, Mansell doubtfully is going to give it another go, and we just saw a glimpse of the brand new Fond Metal driven by Gabriele Tarquini, and the car has done 30 laps in Italy when it was shaken down by the Italian, and it's been shipped out here. It was very slow this morning. It was 28 fastest on a 1:25.528, but if it stays like this till Sunday, Johnny Herbert beaten his best qualifying position, which was 8th, what he did in Monaco.
And a big blow up for Eric Comas. Comas with the Renault, for what was a V10 engine, that's probably about a V7 now, as most of the conrods and bits and pieces in the engine are scattered across the racetrack. So, continued torture for the Ligier team. for Gilles, sometimes I think he himself must wonder, what have I got to do to get back to those heady days of 79 and 80 when I was winning Grand Prix with Jacques Lafitte, Patrick Dupaillet, Didier Pironi, Eric Comas. The quicker of the two cars this morning could only manage 18th, and their time was some 3 seconds a lap slower than the same engine in this car and the Williams that Nigel Mansell and Riccardo Patrese are using. And one has to say it is not the fault of the engine.
Ivan Capelli, I think, did have a problem this morning, John, because he now moves up to 10th position just behind Martin Brundle, Mika Häkkinen, Johnny Herbert, Donna Lazy is 6th, Michael Schumacher still in 5th, Riccardo Patrese is in 4th, Nigel Mansell in 3rd place, Gerhard Berger in 2nd, and still on that pole position, Ayrton Senna, and it could be his 61st pole position of his career, and they're very slow-moving. While you're watching the first official qualifying session for Sunday's Canadian Grand Prix, and you're watching Mega Michael Schumacher, who's currently in 5th place. And another good performance, a man who's come through pre-qualifying, a man who's here for the very first time in his Grand Prix career is Ukio Katayama, who is now in 11th position with the Venturi de Rousse.
Very impressive indeed from Mr. Katayama. First time on this Montreal circuit, and it is a fairly difficult, certainly it's quite a daunting circuit. He was quicker than teammate Bertrand Gachot this morning, and he's still quicker than on this afternoon. So a very impressive performance indeed from a young man from Japan who really has no experience whatsoever of virtually any of these circuits in the Grand Prix calendar.
He just hasn't succeeded yet.
No, it's all very mystifying, and nobody in the team really is prepared to say anything about the performance, certainly from the morning session. But I suppose Nigel really is the man you will have to hear it from directly, and he is saying consistently throughout the season that really the advantage we have is down to himself as much as it is down to the car, and really the more representative performance probably would be that of Riccardo Patrese in the Williams. And I must say I'm not entirely convinced about Nigel's arguments, but one thing that is clear is that McLaren, they worked very, very hard last week at a test at Manicourt in preparation for that French Grand Prix. It was a messy test in that the weather was very changeable, but that man Ayrton Senna, whatever the weather, was out driving his car. They've done a lot of little things, a lot of small changes. None of those changes, either individually or collectively, in the opinion of some of the team members, would add up to this quite remarkable turnaround in performance. So either there's a lot of sandbagging going on from Williams, or McLaren have misinterpreted the degree of improvement they've been making.
Ayrton Senna starting a hot lap. Riccardo Patrese has just improved a little bit, but not his position. 20.682 it is now in the top 10.
Obviously for Senna, knowing that he has got that provisional pole, as we said, that Michael Schumacher now up to 4th place. Another improvement from Schumacher, 1 minute 20.523. But let's watch Ayrton Senna complete this lap, because when Senna gets everything running for him, and by that it has to be the car, the engine, everything perfect, you then begin to see those blistering and very impressive qualifying laps. Nigel Mansell, of course, watching the times. He hasn't got a monitor of what's happening to Ayrton Senna, but he's just waiting for Senna now to complete yet another qualifying lap. And what he is not going to want to see on that is about almost half a second better than he's already achieved, but losing time coming onto the start-finish line, a little bit of a wobble, but this is going to be an improvement from Ayrton Senna. 2/10 quicker, 1:19.775. Well, let's go back to Nigel in the pits and see those eyeballs roll back into the sockets, because fast lap was 1 minute 26 something or other. But here's Schumacher getting on with the program, coming onto the start-finish straight. And while it's very spectacular, it makes great TV. Of course, look at the dust being kicked up. That will not really help his progress. You lose fractions of seconds. Traffic again, Carl Benlinger, his former teammate at Mercedes, giving him lots of room. And really, a circuit like this Gilles Villeneuve circuit, you require a lot of cooperation from fellow competitors. And we have seen from former Grand Prix or previous Grand Prix this season that sometimes that assistance, again running very wide, Schumacher getting onto the dust on the outside of the circuit, pushing really, really hard. Coming through this flat-out right-left, right chicane. A real white knuckle job coming through there. 170, 175 miles an hour. Up to 187, 188 miles an hour. Michael Schumacher, what are you doing? This is not show business. This is serious Formula One. Well, certainly give him 11 out of 10 for style on that particular little escapade. Let's see it again. Obviously, the right foot pushing through the bulkhead, I would say. Almost full lock, full right-hand lock to control that. He had to come off the power to correct the slide finally. He couldn't allow himself to get any wider than he was, isn't it?
John Lacey, currently in 6th place. The fastest Ferrari he's been all weekend again, a 121.785. Well, that is a tenth slower than, a hundredth of a second slower than his best time so far, which is a 121.777. For the Lacey, again this morning, Johnny was one of the first cars out during that untimed session, and he was trying. It was like the track was wet.
Well, look at John Lacey. You talk about never say die. This man does not know how to give up. The only thing he must remember is in 1 week's time he's getting married. So whether that will make a difference to the incorrigible Frenchman from Avignon remains to be seen, but knowing Jean Lacey as we do, the fact that he's getting hit in a week's time will have no effect whatsoever.
This was his birthday yesterday as well, John. He's 28 now. Lacey on the run down the very fast part of the circuit. I think, John, if you look at this circuit, it's either a place you love or you hate.
I enjoyed it any time I raced here. It was a circuit where you could really come to terms with. Although the level of grip from the surface is not particularly high, but you can let a car work, you can make a car work, you can feel it, you can really get a sense of what the car is doing. Some circuits you don't feel that at all. It's either included with that, pleased with the consistency that gives the car, but pleased with the increase in downforce they're getting. It's just now down to the reliability of the mechanical side of that system.
Johnny Herbert in 7th place, just completing another lap, which is after being in the pits for 35 minutes. The other side of the grid, on the bubble, is Paul Belmondo in the March. In 26th place, 27th, Andrea Chiesa.
Very relaxed in the cockpit. Coming down, this is the scene a number of years ago in a sports car race, but one of these manhole covers which were all around the circuit managed to unweld itself from the ring in which it was located, popped out and caused one of the most disturbing accidents I've ever seen in a sports car race.
Senna, Berger, Mansell and Schumacher. That's the top four. We'll be back after the break. And also watching Nigel Mansell, who's just come out of the pits, and I think he's starting a hot lap now.
Well, in fact, he was on a quick lap, but he came up behind Andrea de Cesaris. So Nigel abandoned the lap 3/4 way around, waited again for one of those elusive clear patches on the racetrack. Is now trying to improve. He had a marginal improvement. He still remained in 3rd place. His best time to date is 1:20.157. But what he has to do is get into the 1:19.7 second bracket to regain pole position. Johnny Herbert now improved up to 7th place, 1:21.948. Another excellent performance from Johnny Herbert and from his new Lotus 107.
Ayrton Senna still the only man into the 1:19. Gerhard Berger, his teammate, 1:20.145. Nigel Mansell is halfway around the lap at the island hairpin, this is. Kicking up the dust, coming out of that hairpin. Ricardo Patrese is in 4th, Michael Schumacher 5th, John Lacey 6th. Johnny Herbert, an excellent performance, I would say, in 7th place. Ivan Capelli getting on with the program in 8th, and Mika Hakkinen is 9th. And then Martin Brundle is 10th, but John, is it going to be quicker?
I think it is. Well, so much for my thoughts.
Well, you can't get them right all the time. Ayrton Senna stays on pole position. Now, I must say, that was a free lap from Nigel.
The entertainment here on the Gilles Villeneuve circuit in Montreal, and Frank Williams now looking more concerned than at any point of the season so far. And his man, Nigel Mansell, and that red 5, he's having a little rest. That's not what Grand Prix drivers are meant to do. They should be running back to the pits. Well, I suppose there's nothing left for Eric Thomas to drive, because he was in the spare car anyway, having blown up the engine earlier in the session.
The big worry for the people at the back of the grid at the moment, being Paul Belmondo in 27th, Eric van der Poel in 28th, Andrea Chiesa and Damon Hill, is that I suppose it could well rain tomorrow. The weather forecast here is a dry morning tomorrow morning, but then tomorrow afternoon and also Sunday afternoon they're forecasting showers.
Well, we are beginning to see the change in the weather, and from what we had on Thursday, a stunning day all day long, a beautiful morning. We've got now Damon Hill pulling off at the same part of the circuit as we saw Comas's car. A little log jam around the back of the circuit, but really Nigel now coming back to the pits very slowly. So weather does play an important part in the Montreal Grand Prix, the Grand Prix of Canada here on the Gilles Villeneuve circuit. With the wind, we've seen quite a strong wind blowing all day. We're now gradually getting a high cloud base. We're expecting a little bit of rain this evening. Tomorrow is a little bit of an unknown certainty. But this place, the weather is changeable, and very rapidly so.
Well, that's about a minute and a half, 2 minutes to go till the end of this session, where we see the last four still unchanged. We see Olivier Grouillard, who's spun and is in 20th position.
Well, at least Olivier can see who's behind him this time, can't he? He doesn't have to use his mirrors. But look at that. Almost got the nose clipped. Akira Suzuki coming through there in his footwork, not paying as much attention to that. Very vigorously waved. And again, Stefano Modena not paying attention. Now let's have a look at Olivier pirouetting.
John, that's the place where you said, I don't really know why.
Oh, and he's hit the wall. His right rear has hit the wall, so he really is going to be immobilized now. Sitting with the car at 90 degrees to the circuit, and he will be hoping that his fellow competitors do pay attention to that waved yellow flag. Not that one there, but one as they exit this left and right little third gear sequence now. Jean Alesi, pay attention to that waved yellow flag. Well, Grouillard's out of his car, deciding that it's safer to get away from it as quickly as possible. Lazy, you see coming in there, squirming under braking, sliding a little bit wide, understeering in the first part of the right-hand corner, and losing position for the exit. And again, all these right and left and right-hand corners, it's the second part of the corner that's the important part. All the time you see drivers rushing down into the first part, trying to get in very quickly, and then losing time in that corner because they've gone in too deep, too fast.
Ayrton Senna on his way, I think, to a provisional pole position here on the circuit. Gilles Villeneuve in Canada. And of course, you've seen it all again live here on Eurosport. Riccardo Patrese, a tenth of a tenth of a second slower than Ayrton Senna. Gerhard Berger is in third, the first one in the 120s. Nigel Mansell is in fourth place. In fifth place, it's Michael Schumacher. In sixth place, it's Johnny Herbert. And everybody that is still out on the circuit is on their last lap. So I don't think we can see major improvement. Jean Alesi is seventh. Eighth is Ivan Capelli. Ninth is
a red flag now out on the circuit. Now that is because of Olivier Grouillard's car being in a very dangerous part of the circuit. But in effect, the session is going to come, well, in fact, the session is finished. It's just gone over the 1 hour, 37 seconds. But that means, the red flag means, come to an immediate halt.
John, we can say it's been a very exciting hour here.
Yes, it has. It's been a fairly typical session here at the Gilles Villeneuve circuit. It is, in effect, I would call it a road circuit. You continue to see improvement throughout the session. But I say the surprise really is the improvement in performance from the McLaren team. And I've been saying that the Honda engine, certainly since Monaco, is in my opinion now the most powerful, the quickest engine in Formula One. The team have not been able to balance out the performance of their chassis to that of the engine. But all of a sudden, suddenly we're now seeing McLaren back at the top. And are we going to see this on Saturday afternoon? Well, we're going to have to wait 23 hours or so, and that question to be answered. But one thing is for sure, that once Ayrton Senna sees himself in the front, he's not going to give it up.
Well, Ayrton Senna, it could be his 61st pole position, and what a way to follow up that maybe lucky win in Monaco. But I must say, Ayrton Senna did put himself into a position to pick up the pieces if there were any, and Nigel Mansell had to make that pit stop. So Ayrton Senna is fastest. Will he be still fastest tomorrow afternoon? Well, you can see it all live here on Eurosport from John Watson and Allard Kalff. Bye for now.
And Allard Kalff for the second official qualifying session for tomorrow's Canadian Grand Prix. And Ayrton Senna is still on that pole position, John, but Nigel Mansell was blindingly fast this morning.
Yes, and we had a very messy, unofficial 1.5 hours this Saturday morning here in Montreal, because overnight we had very heavy rain. The circuit was saturated when we began, and it only dried out in the closing moments of that 1.5 hour session. But dry enough it was for Nigel Mansell to yet again claim to be quickest in any qualifying session. There's only 2 sessions now out of 7 events so far this year that Nigel Mansell has not topped the practice or unofficial timings. So Mansell getting to grips, and grip really is the word, with his Williams Renault here. He had a lot of problems throughout the Friday session. He had a lot of traffic also. So Nigel now a little bit more relaxed, a little bit happier. A few moments ago we had a few words with Mansell, and he seemed to be more relaxed than he was on the Friday afternoon. But here we have one of the earlier men out on the track, Martin Brundle. And Martin was 6th quickest this morning, and looking to get his Benetton up as far into the field. And Benetton really are one of the few teams I think have got a very realistic chance of, let's say, getting a result on Sunday afternoon.
Benetton, of course, very fortunate to win here last year with Nelson Piquet when Nigel Mansell stopped on that very last lap, and Martin Brundle, who drove a very good race in Monaco, where he kept up with Nigel Mansell's pace through most of the race, although he was a lap behind after he had to replace a nose cone when he ran into the back of Gerhard Berger. Brundle 6th fastest this morning, a little bit faster than teammate Michael Schumacher. 2nd fastest this morning, slower than yesterday, was Ayrton Senna. Gerhard Berger was 3rd, and in 4th place was Riccardo Patrese, who only did 10 laps, 3 of them right at the end of the session, because he had an oil leak in the hydraulic system that operates the active suspension. And of course a spare car being operated by Nigel Mansell, who done 37 laps in 1.5 hours.
Yes, Mansell was very busy this morning, and obviously very anxious indeed to get both the race car and the spare car to the peak of handling that he really has enjoyed throughout the season so far. And it was rather unexpected to see the Williams team, both drivers, off the normal pace we're accustomed to with Williams this year. And in fact, no one was more surprised than the McLaren team themselves, as they don't feel that the progress that they've been making was significantly large to account for all of a sudden having Ayrton Senna outperforming the 2 Williams.
Well, not only Ayrton Senna, because Gerhard Berger was fastest for most of that session yesterday, John. Well, there's Nigel. It could be pole position number 24 out of his career.
Yes, well, this is a lap now. Mansell has had his out lap. He's had a warming up lap as well. And this now, if we can get to watch it rather than looking into the McLaren pits. And well, here we are. Oh, Nigel, that is not going to help your progress one little bit. Now, let's see another donut from Nigel.
Well, he did that yesterday as well, we must say, and he's trying very, very hard.
And that's that one particular corner. It's a left, right. It's not really a chicane. It's just a sequence of lefts and rights around the circuit, 3rd gear. And that would have been, or meant to have been, one of Nigel's more serious attempts. Ayrton Senna, of course, back in the pits, a wry little grin came in his face. And, well, he's sitting back in the comfortable position, knowing that currently he holds the pole position. and he's aware that Nigel will be trying very hard indeed to relegate him off that pole position. But little episodes like that, little errors around the circuit, of course, will mean that Nigel will put himself under a great deal more pressure without any efforts from Ayrton Senna.
Anxious moments for the McLaren team in the pit. There's none of the cars out, which I think is a surprise, because although the cloud base is very high, you can see rain coming, and the weather could change within half an hour. On the bubble at the moment is Gabriele Tarquini, making his debut with the new Font Metal. Paul Belmondo's 27th. Both the Brabhams are 28th and 30th, and Andrea Chiesa in the old Font Metal is 29th. Good performances yesterday from both Lotus drivers, Johnny Herbert in 6th and Mika Häkkinen in 9th. And I think a wonderful performance from Ukio Katayama.
Yes, indeed, Ukio Katayama was, I think, one of the major surprises of the Friday qualifying, and a very solid 11th place. And in fact, he backed it up this morning by being, in fact, 12th quickest. But those wet sessions, wet starting, dry finishing, tend to be, to some degree, rather misleading, because it depends really on the time of the day that you are on the track. And literally, every lap you do ought to be an improvement. Well, Nigel Mansell now looking to find some improvement in himself, with Johnny Herbert ahead of him in the Lotus, and Nigel looking, or Mika Häkkinen, it is in the Lotus now, Nigel looking to get in a quick lap early in this session to enable himself to go back into the pits and consolidate. As you see on that point of the circuit, he was 0.8 of a second slower than Senna's Friday pole time. Well, that little spin he had on the last lap will take a little bit of settling. 1 minute 20.568, some half a second slower than he did yesterday. So no improvement from Mansell, but he will now, I think, progress on rather than backing off. That wasn't a satisfactory lap from his point of view. He'll progress on and do, I think, another lap and try, while the circuit is relatively empty, and really this has been the major problem most people have been experiencing throughout the 2 days of practicing and qualifying, just to find that clean lap, that clear lap. It's worth more in itself than a fresh set of tyres.
Mansell, he's trying very hard in a little twitch on the braking where he might be losing a couple of hundredths of a second. And let's just wait for the first intermediate time to see whether he's up or down on Senna's pole time. No one's actually improved yet of the people that are out there. Nigel Mansell is easily the fastest. Martin Brundle is on a 22.6, which is 2/10 slower than yesterday, but no real improvements as yet. Stefano Modena getting out of the way, and Mansell being a little bit quicker, but there's only one chicane to go. But it's going to be close.
Well, that might get him up a couple of places. I think the time looks good enough to get him into second place in the grid. In fact, it's put him third, indeed.
Just behind teammate Riccardo Patrese. So we've got an improvement from Nigel Mansell from a 120.157. He has improved to 119.9 here on Eurosport, the second official qualifying session for tomorrow's Canadian Grand Prix. And of course, you can also see that one live here on Eurosport. Ayrton Senna has just taken the track, and also Michael Schumacher trying to improve on his grid position, which is third row, inside third row, the fifth position. And again, John, that car trying to get away from the German.
Well, I think that part of the circuit does appear to be very slippery indeed. We certainly saw yesterday in Friday's session a lot of cars, both on the unofficial and in the qualifying session, spinning, but mostly they were spinning on the exit of the corner. There weren't so many going into the corner, but you again, with Schumacher coming through, the car really scrabbling to get grip, now right front locking up. And the problem on this qualifying session is there's a lot of different pressure from that in the on-time session in the morning. You go out in the morning, you're not required to go quickly, you pick it up in a different way. Now, Schumacher, Mansell, other people we've seen out today, they know they've got a limited amount of time, they've got two sets of tyres, and they're look at that Schumacher running very, very wide. We saw him do that again yesterday, very spectacularly so.
Well, Schumacher's time of 1:21.045 is his fastest of the day so far, but 6/10 slower than his grid position.
Well, all that can be accounted for in those moments you saw around the back of the circuit and coming onto that start-finish straight. So it's really a time for a great deal of self-control, in fact, and it's a question very much more haste, less speed, rather than trying to go out and nail the thing. Allow it to develop, and I think that going very, very quickly on your first flying lap may not be the right strategy with the circuit in the condition it's in.
Ayrton Senna is on his first flying lap at the moment, somewhere out on the circuit. He's crossed start-finish. I don't think that first flying lap would see an improvement. We've seen improvements from Nigel Mansell and Martin Brundle, and also a big improvement from both Dalara's Pierluigi Martini from 25th up to 18th, and JJ Leto, his teammate, from 23rd up to 17th. So the Dallara team might be heading in the right direction there.
Yes, but there's still a very long way to go, and I suspect that by the time the bulk of the cars have been out in the circuit, Martini and Leto, who really struggled very badly indeed yesterday afternoon, will be probably much closer to where they were in that Friday afternoon session than what we're seeing now. We're only some 15 minutes into the session, and already, well, Jean Alesi sitting back, not quite sure what he can do to improve his 7th position from Friday afternoon. He knows that really the car, he approaches to the limit of the car so early in a qualifying session that I'm sure he knows in himself if he can find another 10th or 2 tenths, well, that's about it. But really what he's looking for now are seconds, not tenths, to give him a chance to come up onto the second or so row of the grid, which is really where he needs to be, have any possibility at all to be a factor in this race tomorrow afternoon.
Alesi at the moment be 2 seconds off pole position, and Bertrand Gachot, he spun this morning. We saw him stall, trying to drive out of the pits, and another spin for the Belgian or Frenchman or whatever he is these days.
Well, Patrese now coming up to complete what looks like a proper qualifying lap. He did 1 lap in a 1 minute 23, and that was just his opening account. Now 1 minute 21.623, but again almost 2 seconds slower than Patrese managed to do yesterday afternoon. And it does look that the session this afternoon, the circuit, the track conditions are not particularly quick. Now we're looking at a replay of Bertrand Gachot about to get back on the track. Bertrand, having had a fairly fraught time this morning, he went off on the wet, stuck the car into the sand traps, and reluctantly had to get out of the car. Then a spin, you've just seen that spin, and on top of which his teammate Ukiya Katayama, who has never been here before, is going significantly quicker.
Situation at the top unchanged for the moment. Senna, Patrese, Mansell and Berger, that's the top 4. Then the first V8 engine car of Michael Schumacher, and then Johnny Herbert in 6th place. A very good performance yesterday from both Johnny Herbert and Mika Häkkinen. And Häkkinen said, we'll wait for tomorrow because I'm going to go quicker. Well, he's done a 23.4 so far, which is only a 10th of yesterday's qualifying time, but he's got to improve, well, say a second to get close to Johnny Herbert. Well, Patrese beating his own best of the day again, but still a long way off the time he did yesterday, and also a long way off Nigel Mansell's time. And John, I think Nigel's 1:19.948. Well, it is possible to do 19s, I would say, today.
Well, it's certainly.
Well, and that is very bad for the Brazilian, because that's not only his car in the gravel, exactly the same place where Bertrand Gachot was this morning. Ayrton getting out of his car. That would mean they were going to tow his car away with that shovel we've seen this morning, and there will be 1 set of tyres gone for Ayrton Senna.
Yes, big surprise. Let's look at it again. Senna coming out of that very quick right-hand corner, getting very wide again. A number of people we've seen doing that white line at the edge of the track. You get your right rear wheel over that, under braking. The grip is 0, and what you see is the car just being pulled into that spin. And of course, you've got nowhere to go but that sand trap. And a rather undignified exit for Ayrton Senna. Now he'll have to make his way back. He's in the opposite side of that lake, by the way, so it's not easy to get back. He can't get back quickly, and he ain't going to swim, that's for sure. Senna now trying to get that coveted pole position. And really, he's the only one that has, in my mind, looked like he could do something serious to alter the grid positions from what we had established on Friday afternoon. Ayrton Senna, we've seen a few moments ago, ended up in the sand trap, and he will have to make his way back, and he's got to go the long way around. There is no shortcut from where he is. Of course, he's got the spare car this weekend, and that car will be ready for him when he gets back in. But whether that will have one of these even further revised new V12 Honda engines in its lightweight form, we suspect that it does. And in fact, the performance of the Honda engine in Monaco was very, very impressive. They actually used that engine in the race. They didn't take it out and put in a slightly heavier engine. They used the newer engine for the Grand Prix of Monaco.
Nigel Mansell going through that 160 mile an hour plus left right hand sweep coming onto the chicane, and he's 0.8 of a second slower than Ayrton Senna's split time, so it will not be an improvement for Nigel Mansell. 20.7. Well, the track might pick up some time later in the afternoon when there's some more rubber down, but for the moment we've got a status quo at the top of the field with the same people in the top 10 as we had before. We haven't seen Johnny Herbert out. Jean Alesi's just taken the track. Another improvement now from Martin Brundle, but that's only a time improvement, not a position. Ivan Capelli hasn't been out yet, and Mika Hakkinen has done a couple of laps.
Well, Mansell continuing on. Normally he does one blisteringly quick lap, then has a lap to cool down to allow the tyres to recover. But this time he's going on and consistently trying to pick up more heat, more grip.
Well, we're looking at
difficult session this afternoon.
Yeah, we're looking at Nigel Mansell, and at the front everything's the same, but right, the positions, say from 23 to 30, it's all changed. Not qualified at the moment. Damon Hill in 30th, Andrea Chiesa in 29th, Eric van der Poel 28th, Aguri Suzuki in 27th, and it's Christian Fittipaldi on the bubble in 26th place, and Paul Belmondo is now 25th.
Again, look at Mansell on the grass, and again, any small gains he made, he's lost. He's actually backed right off coming across the start-finish line. And really a very difficult session for everybody so far here. Of course, Aguri Suzuki being 27th and first of the non-qualifiers. Well, in fact, he's actually just displaced Christian Fittipaldi, so Suzuki is now the man on the bubble, but he's also the man in the tire wall. And looking at Jean Alesi, this may lead to some of the reasons why we saw Suzuki in the tire wall, but well, I don't know what the point of all that was.
It's probably the director practicing his slow-mos. Anyway, Jean Alesi, he's been as spectacular as ever over the last couple of days, and well, even though there's not a lot of grip, he might improve actually.
Well, he doesn't seem to mind a circuit that is producing less grip, because his driving style is such that he does throw the car around a great deal. And the throttle pedal for Jean Alesi is more like a switch. It's either off or on. He doesn't really know anything about throttle control or picking up the throttle progressively and allowing the car to come out of the corner. It's either off or it's on. And how he maintains control is beyond me, but he's actually gone off the circuit. He's pulled off. Carl Wendlinger also missed his braking coming down into that right-left. So Jean Alesi has a problem with the car. He's going to abandon it. That's at the final hairpin bend. That's the corner we saw Nigel Mansell pulling off last year on the last lap. And he'd done something, he pushed something in the middle of the steering column.
It looks like no drive, John. I mean, looks like he's lost all gears for some reason.
Yeah, he's fiddling with the steering wheel, taking it. Well, he's just taking it off. He's decided to abandon ship almost before the car came to a halt, turning off the master switch. Well, it's good to see a driver doing a bit of running. We have criticised some other drivers to get off the wall, for God's sake, as Jean Alesi. That's dangerous. Well, he's actually on the inside of the circuit, so he wants to stay off the wet grass to keep his boots dry. The last thing you want to do is get into a racing car with the leather soles sodden. So Jean Alesi making his way back to the pits.
Well, there we see Damon Hill and Michele Alboreto. Alboreto, of course, came through pre-qualifying, and the Brabham team is one of the teams that could find themselves in pre-qualifying after the British Grand Prix. And Damon Hill again being the slowest driver, and it's not criticising Damon, it's just the car doesn't want to go any faster, I suppose.
Well, the Brabham team have been struggling all year, and even a driver of Damon Hill's quality. And remember, he is the test driver, the official test driver of the Williams Renault team. And we've seen Damon doing very impressive times in that car, so it's not a matter of ability, it's just a factor of the competitiveness of this really struggling Brabham team. Talk of Julian Bailey replacing Damon before this race. But there were discussions with other members of the team, and it was felt that in the interests of continuity, and while the team really isn't at a competitive point, just changing drivers in itself probably would not have any significant contribution to the competitiveness. So Julian Bailey sitting back home, probably watching this in Eurosport and feeling very frustrated that he's not out here in Canada. But of course, if the team did exchange Damon Hill, oh, there's Ivan Capelli off at the same corner that Ayrton Senna went off.
Ayrton Senna is still the fastest man from Riccardo Patrese, Nigel Mansell and Gerhard Berger. We continue after the break. Keep watching Eurosport live from Canada. Canada, Nigel Mansell finishing off another lap at 1:20.106, and it looked good, but it wasn't.
Yes, just again on the exit of the last corner, just the right rear wheel sliding into the grass, and again you're talking about tenths, hundreds of seconds. Well, one of the two Ferraris, which one is
Capelli.
Capelli. The second time I've seen Capelli off. Coming up. Oh, we're getting. Oh, this is a repeat. This is the repeat of what we saw earlier, we believe, unless he's done it for a second time. In fact, I think he did it for a second time. This time he didn't actually manage to reverse it into the sand trap. So Capelli twice now within the space of 5 minutes at this same corner. And one thing I must say, drivers today do seem to take a much longer time to learn from their mistakes.
Well, there's one who's learning from a mistake, walking back to the pits, Ayrton Senna, although he's still on pole position. Riccardo Patrese is still in second place. Both times were set yesterday afternoon. Nigel Mansell is the first one to improve to third place from fifth, so Gerhard Berger is dropped to fourth. Then it's Michael Schumacher in fifth. Johnny Herbert hasn't been out yet, but is still in sixth. Jean Alesi seventh, and Martin Brundle moved up to eighth from 10th. And Gabriele Tarquini with that new font metal. Yesterday he did it 1:24.281. Today Sergio Rilland said, well, maybe we lean a bit more on the car. He's improved to 17th on the 1:23.063, and that's not bad for a car that's being run for the first time.
Yes, very good indeed. The car only did a few laps before it came out to Canada. It did them at the Ferrari test track. So that suddenly spin on the exit of that final chicane onto the start-finish straight. But the car is not in a particularly dangerous position, though. I'd like to see Damon, if it is Damon, getting out of it a bit more rapidly. Well, there we see it. Oh, it's Van der Poel.
Well, actually, he lost it going into the chicane and basically couldn't get it back. It looked like an error on the first part from Eric, or maybe something broke on the car.
Well, I think it's more like an error. That wasn't a mechanical failure. That was just, I think, down to the driver this time. The car, it's not in a dangerous position, but it really needs to be taken away as quickly as possible.
Martin Brundle still moved up to 17th, and then we thought he was going to move back when other people moved up, but he's moved up to 15th, a 1:22.850, and I think that is the biggest improvement of today. And still not qualified again is Aguri Suzuki, Eric van der Poel, who's in the wall, Andrea Chiesa and Damon Hill. And on the bubble now is Eric Comas. And we've got red flags with about 7 or 8 minutes to go in this session. And the question is why, I would say.
Well, I think somewhere around the back of the circuit we saw that waved yellow flag. We couldn't see a car off. We couldn't see a car in a hazardous or dangerous position. So we have to wait and see what that reason for the red flag coming out. We did have a red flag yesterday afternoon right at the end of the session. That was put out rather than the checkered flag because there was Olivier Grillard's car stuck 90 degrees out on the circuit. But that was done principally to amusing little incidents we've ever seen at any Grand Prix. I wonder, will the FISA fine the driver of that car for that little bit of performance? I don't know what his excuse was. Was it the tyres going off, no grip?
Well, not enough wing, maybe. Who knows? Anyway, the question now is, I think, are they gonna restart this session? We should find out on. They've stopped the clock anyway. 51 minutes 56 seconds.
Well, they will have to restart it because there are some 8 minutes of this session left, and there are a number of team managers who would go AWOL if they thought the session was going to be abandoned. Well, that is one of the most amusing little incidents I've ever seen at any Grand Prix. These are course cars. They're meant to be sent out when there's a problem on the circuit. They're not meant to create the problem, as this one is doing. And undoubtedly the driver of that car will wish to quietly disappear. There we see it now. Well, the red flag was out after he went. I mean, what is this guy meant to be doing?
Let's give him the benefit of the doubt, John, and maybe he sort of decided a little late to try and make the corner. But anyway, it's Ayrton Senna who is still on pole position. There's about 9 minutes left, and you'll see them after the break.
He's closing very quickly indeed. And while Belmondo's fate is almost secure at 25th, Nigel certainly will want to get through as cleanly as possible. Look at that. McLaren, Venturi, LaRousse, Van Metal all scrubbing Nigel. Now what are you doing, Nigel? You've given up, or have you got a problem? That's very reminiscent of what happened last year, but I suspect Belmondo didn't cooperate. He didn't get through quickly and cleanly. He backed off. He's now got Patrese closing down very quickly indeed, but Mansell now picking up speed, and hopefully he'll not jeopardize anything that Patrese's been doing. And on he goes for another lap.
Nigel starting what is possibly his last. Well, I think he's got 2 more laps to go before the checkered flag comes out. There's 57 minutes gone in this qualifying session.
Well, look at Mansell, I mean, right over the curb. The 2 inside wheels well and truly over the curb, and that's an indication to me that he's having to almost take a shortcut. The grip is so little, he's climbing all over the curbs, trying to find grip where ordinarily you wouldn't want to be. With this notorious left and right corner, we've seen no end of action there throughout the 2 days, both going into it and exiting it. Most of it's been going into it today. Yesterday, most of it was on the exit. And again, down here, a lot of cars taking to the grass down the escape road. And Mansell navigates his way round successfully. And this is probably the last opportunity he has to make any improvement. But looking at the lap, I have to say, it doesn't look like the time is there.
Which he said this morning as well, John, it doesn't look as confident as we've seen him in the previous races.
This is surprising, really, because the advantage that this team has with Nigel, with the Renault engine, with the actively suspended chassis, has been very, very graphic indeed. 20.380, and that, I suspect, really is about it for Nigel. And not only is he not on pole position for the first time this year, look at it again, coming down. Well, under braking, got the rear brakes locked on, thinking, oops-a-daisy, well, and he had a second bite of it as well, just for the sake of it. Okay, Bertrand Gachot coming down into corners. I've seen him doing this quite a lot this weekend, getting his car right on the very edge of the circuit. And I would recommend to a lot of the people to give themselves 6 inches or maybe even a foot, because the edges of these circuits, and this one in particular, are very, very slippery.
Well, if this is not Nigel Mansell's pole position lap, then he's not gonna get it here in Canada, because the checkered flag is out and Ayrton Senna is on that pole position, I would say very safely. Oh, well, Nigel gets very close. I'm just gonna wait and see.
It's certainly going to be the best lap we've seen. 1:18.513, and he has done it. Absolutely amazing. Nigel Mansell.
No, he hasn't done it. I think there was a mistake from the computer on screen, John. We're waiting for that time, and 19.977 came up on the screen here.
Well, we saw an 18.5. The clock stopped on the screen.
But that was wrong, a 19.977, a very good performance from Nigel Mansell, but not good enough. Aguri Suzuki, I think, is out of this Grand Prix. Martin Brundle improved, but didn't improve. Oh, he did improve a position. No, he didn't. He's still in front of Jean Alesi, who is in 8th. So we've got Ayrton Senna on pole position for the 61st time in his Grand Prix career, together with Riccardo Patrese. He is the front row. Mansell and Berger are 3rd and 4th. That's the 2nd row. 3rd row, Schumacher and Herbert. And the row behind them is Brundle and Alesi. A possible for an interesting first couple of laps.
Allard, Kalff asked about his prospects.
Especially on race configuration, I think our car should work better against our direct opposition here. I mean, especially McLaren Honda. And I still have the first row, so I think I'm quite satisfied because, in effect, today I couldn't really use my car as I wanted.
Now, is there somewhere in the back of your mind this little thought that it would be handy if you would take the lead and Ayrton and Gerhard would be in front of Nigel?
Well, I don't think about what can happen behind me. The only thing I would care it is to be in front at the first corner. That it should be very helpful for me. So I will try to go in front of Ayrton if I can at the first corner, and then we will see after.
To do it, but I think you must remember that they're very, very skillful in their own right, and it's a different type of racing, the ovals, but I'd certainly like to look at it, but I tell you, these guys are quick.
Now, would you have him as a teammate next year?
Oh, no, that'd be great. I think it'd upset Riccardo, but yeah, if he could fix it, I think I could handle that. It'd be good.
Now, going around Indianapolis doing 230 mile an hour is much different than this. How would you rate Nigel as a driver?
Oh, I mean, I truly believe Nigel is one of the best drivers in the world, and he's proved it over the years, time and time again. I think, you know, it's great, and Nigel would definitely be a contender at any race in any race car that he ever decided to get into. So.
It cost me a lot of money, but I paid him enough to say.
Good luck to Dover.
A great champion. Thank you. Great to see you again. Thanks for coming by.
Fourth fastest is Austria's Gerhard Berger, giving McLaren and Williams the top 4 places. While 5th, behind Berger, is Germany's Michael Schumacher in the Benetton Ford. Berger prepares to go out. After an unhappy Monaco, an accident in qualifying, and so Ford-powered on the 25th anniversary of the Ford DFV's winning debut at Zandvoort with Jim Clark back in 1967. Ford still with Lotus all these years later. Johnny Herbert and Mika Hakkinen both enjoying the new Lotus 107, which they're coming to terms with very rapidly after some gearbox problems early on. So Johnny Herbert 6th, Mika Hakkinen there 10th. But they don't have the latest Series 7 engine, which Benetton enjoy, nor yet do they have the Series 6. We'll hear more about that in a moment. Johnny Herbert, very impressive 6th place. Martin Brundle of Britain 7th behind him, and Jean Alesi for Ferrari, fastest of the red cars, in 8th place. Johnny Herbert driving at Le Mans next weekend for Mazda, so he's got a lot on his mind, not only in Canada this afternoon, but in France next weekend.
Yeah, it's gone very well.
Now, when we were in Mexico, you said, well, by the time we get the new 107, we'll be as quick as the Benettons. You're right behind Michael Schumacher and in front of Martin Brundle. Does it give you cause for more optimism if you may be even able to get hold of a 6 Series engine?
I think it would obviously help because, you know, you're probably, with all the fuel and everything else, you're probably talking about 40 horsepower, probably. Yeah, I'm not really sure, but that would be a great help. That's you know, a definite thing. We haven't got it at the moment, so we're going to have to do the best we can with the chassis we got. It still needs a lot of work doing. It's only really its 2nd race.
With one of the most exciting finishes for years, the Monaco Grand Prix stood Formula One on its ear, as Ayrton Senna and a loose Williams wheel nut just denied Nigel Mansell a record season-opening 6th successive victory. 2 weeks later, the rivals meet again on Montreal's superb Gilles Villeneuve circuit, a hard, demanding track which tests car and driver alike and on which both Senna and Mansell have won in the past. For Senna, Canada could be good news. So far, the Williams Renault has been superior to his McLaren Honda. But now, Honda have closed the power gap. And on Friday, Ayrton revelled in his extra horsepower. Pole position for the first time in 7 races. For Mansell, Friday was misery. Not enough grip, reduced horsepower and heavy traffic saw him 4th on the grid. On Saturday, he was fastest in both sessions, but with the track slower, the damage was done. Mansell was not in pole position for the first time this year. In the championship, he leads Riccardo Patrese by 28 points and his chief rival, Ayrton Senna, by 38. But he can't relax, especially as Patrese, Grand Prix's most experienced driver, is ahead of Mansell on the grid and just as hungry for the championship. And Riccardo loves Canada. Montreal is bumpy and slippery and anyone can spin off, even Ayrton Senna. With uncertain weather and a high attrition rate, anything can happen, and maybe at the Gilles Villeneuve circuit, Lotus could come good with their superb new car. The brilliant Johnny Herbert, winner of last year's Le Mans race, starts 6th and could finish much higher. Senna first on the grid, Mansell 3rd and Patrese in between. The 2 Benettons of Schumacher and Brundle sandwiching Herbert's Lotus. Alesi's Ferrari 8th and Capelli's 9th. Katayama a superb 11th in his Larousse. Gabriele Tarquini is 18th for his first race in the new Fondmetal. Boutsen and Comas start a depressed 21st and 22nd in their Ligiers, and Olivier Griard's Tyrrell is last on the grid. And it's going. Senna really feeds in the power, as does Mansell. They both leap forward, and Mansell is past Patrese already. Nigel Mansell up into 2nd position, a sensational start. Patrese is 3rd, Berger is 4th, Schumacher is 5th. In 6th position, it is Martin Brundle, but Mansell is already doing what he did at Monaco. He's trying to saw the McLaren in front of him in half. If he had a blade on the front of his car, he'd surely do it. But Senna has got the power, he's got superior power, and if he can get it well down, he may be able to build up a little bit of a lead. But Mansell pushing hard. You can see there's a gap developing already between the 2 Williams drivers. Nigel Mansell in 2nd place, Riccardo Patrese in 3rd position. Berger is challenging, and already out goes Gabriele Tarquini in the sole new GR02 Fondmetal, designed by Sergio Ridler. But never mind that, because look at the race as they come down to the hairpin. That is turn 9 for the first time. It is Senna, Mansell, Patrese, Berger.
And I think Brundle then just moved up past Johnny Herbert then into 6th place. And this was the start that Senna wanted. It was a great start by Nigel Mansell, but from 3rd on the grid it wasn't quite enough. And this is the critical thing. Senna in race trim, still no match for the Williamses in terms of speed, but he's going to make himself awfully hard to pass. He had to get to the first corner first to make a race of it. He did a tremendous job in qualifying when the Williamses weren't quite at their best to get the car onto pole. And with Honda with more power and Shell with a new crew of fuel, particularly for qualifying, there was certainly more power available. But in the race, and here we see the start again, Senna got it moving absolutely on the green, but a fabulous start from Mansell from the 2nd row, but still not enough. Senna had the inside line for the first corner there.
Well, Ayrton Senna now is going to have the sort of pressure potentially for 68 laps that he had for 3 laps at Monaco, because behind him is the man who won the first 5 Grand Prix of 1992, Nigel Mansell, in a car which seems to handle better than the McLaren. So Senna, Mansell, Patrese, Berger, Schumacher, Brundle, the 2 Benettons were still well in touch.
Yes, and the two Lotuses. The new Lotus now going well with Herbert in 7th place, Häkkinen in 8th. But watch out in this race for Martin Brundle. He went extremely well in the warm-up this morning. He's expressed himself very pleased indeed, as has Schumacher, with the race set up on the Benetton, and they did that yesterday and the day before, and Brundle was second quickest in the warm-up and right up with Mansell, and they said that was done on full tanks. Like a second quicker than the McLaren. Pressure now on Senna.
Terrific pressure on Senna, because you notice how Patrese has closed on Mansell and Brundle has closed on Patrese. I think that Ayrton Senna is obviously driving well within himself. He's determined to keep on the racing line, determined to not let anybody past, because I believe he knows that if Mansell or Patrese will get past him, they will pull away. So we've got a long snake of cars. We're on lap 3 of the Canadian Grand Prix now. Race order: Senna leading Mansell, in 3rd position Patrese, in 4th place it is Gerhard Berger, in 5th position Schumacher, 6th is Martin Brundle, and then the two Lotuses of Johnny Herbert in 7th place, Mika Häkkinen in 8th position. Wonderful aerial view as they go round the hairpin.
Yes, you're quite right about Senna not driving on the limit at the moment, because he has, in his old age, if you can call it that, become a very canny driver, and Senna is a much more complete driver than he was 3 or 4 or even a couple of years ago, and he will be looking after his tyres at this stage. Without any doubt, he'll be trying not to slide the car. He's in clean air, and he'll be trying to make the Williamses behind him slide about a bit to put more work into their tyres. Certainly for the first 10 laps of the race, that'll be the case.
And very interesting indeed that the leading Ferrari, that of Jean Alesi in 9th position, is headed by both the Lotus cars. As down to the right-hander there's a touch there, and one of them was Bertrand Gachot on the right, and the other was his teammate Katayama. That won't be at all popular. The two Venturi LaRousse drivers have a coming together. There was some bodywork broken off there, and it wouldn't at all surprise me if one of them is out. Although whether it's Gachot or Katayama, I can't tell you.
Yes, and that looked like Gachot getting a bit over-enthusiastic, trying to get past his teammate down the inside. As we return to Senna, still keeping it cool at the front, and I think Johnny Herbert will be kicking himself a little bit in that he let Brundle get past him on the first lap going into this hairpin here that we're looking at from above, and in fact Herbert could have protected the inside line there, because he's keeping up well, but he also is keeping out of trouble, which he needs to be. He's had 1 or 2 coming together as quite an oily camera lens there on Schumacher's car.
This may look like a procession, and indeed that is exactly what it is, but not for 1 second should you think it is not exciting, because remember that each of these drivers is trying desperately to pressure the man in front, to find a way past him, to make him make a mistake, with Senna definitely controlling the pace of the race, which explains why everybody behind him is so close to the man in front. Senna, Mansell, Patrese, Berger, Schumacher, Brundle, no change there. Herbert 7th, Häkkinen 8th. In 9th position it is Jean Alesi. In 10th position, and this is magnificent, is Karl Wendlinger. 11th is Ivan Capelli, and in 6th position Katayama, who had that touch with Bertrand Gachot, who was at the time in 13th place. So now down to the hairpin. That is a first gear, 30-mile-an-hour corner. Accelerate away. Now on the left-hand side of them, they've got the Olympic rowing strip. On the right, they've got the lake. It's up to 4th, 5th and 6th gear. They're doing about 190 miles an hour as they come to the right-left flick of turns 12 and 13. Then through the kink, which leads into the start and finish very, very short straight, which they're approaching now with the Cosmos Bridge in the background. Here's another lap completed. This is the end of lap 5 out of 69, and it's still Senna holding everybody up as you look at the two Lotuses. There's the Brazilian. And Ayrton Senna won here in 1988, his first year with McLaren. then in 1990. He's been chased by the winner in 1986, Nigel Mansell, who came so close to winning last year.
Yes, Mansell for the last 2 or 3 laps has just sat back a little bit, which I think is a good, sensible thing to do, also to conserve his tyres and take stock of the situation. He knows there's no hurry, it's a long race, and he now seems to be moving up, yes, and he's starting to have a look. So he sat back for a bit, and now he's having a look. Patrese certainly has a look of a man a little bit more fired up about him today. And Hakkinen going extremely well in 8th place there. He was right up with Herbert just now. The two Benettons seem to be taking an interest in each other and going into the hairpin each lap there.
Ayrton Senna has suggested that they might have the active suspension on the McLaren in 3 races' time. They've been developing it for a long time, and there's no doubt that the Williams car has got an advantage over the McLaren in terms of handling. And still no change. It's so difficult to find a way past here, as it is at every other Grand Prix circuit, because there is only one racing line, no matter how wide the circuit is. And we're with Martin Brundle now, looking at his teammate Schumacher in front of him, and Schumacher, number 19, is in 5th position. Immediately behind him, now there's Schumacher in the Benetton Ford V8 with the new Series 7 engine, which is certainly doing the business here in Canada. Oh, out goes Bertrand Gachot, so that's 2 retirements. Gabriele Tarquini has retired, and Bertrand Gachot in the Venturi Larousse on lap 13. Tarquini went out on lap 1, and here's a replay of exactly what happened. He hit, I know people accuse me of having a go at Olivier Grilliard, and I don't know whether it was Grilliard's fault or not, but I noticed that it was Grilliard that Gachot hit. So either Gachot turned in too early or Grilliard moved over. But whatever the reason, the result was the same. Bertrand Gachot is out, and it's still on lap 13 out of 69. Senna, Mansell, Patrese, Berger in 4th position. In 5th place, it's Michael Schumacher in the Benetton. 6th is his teammate Martin Brundle. 7th is Johnny Herbert. 8th is Mika Hakkinen. And about 4 seconds covers the first 8. Right, well, just while we're waiting for something to happen in the way of a passing manoeuvre, let's follow them round the circuit and talk a little about speeds. My goodness, the speeds are terrific. You get a wonderful impression of speed on this Gilles Villeneuve circuit, named after the great Ferrari pilot Gilles Villeneuve. And there on the left you see Gerhard Berger, and there's a spin, and that is Mansell. Mansell spun. Well, this is terrible for the British driver. He's going right. He looks as though he's out of the race.
He's hit the barrier, I think. Mansell, we didn't see it happen. We just saw the end of it, but I think the front right corner is off the car. I see debris, and hopefully we'll get a replay of this, because we didn't see what happened there. But that is Mansell out of the race.
For the first time in 1992. Now, Mansell has had a wonderfully reliable car. He's driven superbly all season. He won the first 5 races of the year. He won he finished in 6th position. Now, let's have a look. Here is Riccardo Patrese with Berger. Patrese and Mansell, it looks to me as though he just went off on the sand and he's lost it. So I'm guessing, but it looks to me as though Mansell just put his front wheels on the inside of the corner. You can see that the front wing has been hit, and you can see, incidentally, as they go through the picture, that Berger has got ahead of Riccardo Patrese. So it's now McLaren's 1st and 2nd on lap 16. Senna leads, Berger 2nd, down to 3rd position goes Riccardo Patrese. Mansell said, now, are they going to have to stop the race? Because there are stones all over the circuit. There's a piece of Mansell's right front wing, and he's, through they go. And the Benetton's tucked up behind Riccardo Patrese. This looks like a bad race for Williams, because Riccardo Patrese in 3rd position, the chap who finished 2nd last year, is being pushed very hard indeed by Michael Schumacher, who is now in 4th position, and Martin Brundle, who is 5th. And Mansell's probably hit his ankle or his leg. That will explain why he sat in the car for so long. Well, Canada has not been kind over the years to Nigel Mansell. Certain victories seemed on the cards in 1991, only for him to retire on the last lap. And so the snake has reformed with one missing vital ingredient, Nigel Mansell. And it's reformed now with, as they come down to the hairpin on lap 17, the McLaren formation that we have got so used to seeing in the past. Senna leading, Berger second, Patrese third, Schumacher in fourth position. Fifth now is Martin Brundle. Up into the points comes Johnny Herbert in the Lotus in sixth position. There he was. Right behind him, his teammate Mika Häkkinen. And then behind Häkkinen in eighth position, it is Jean Alesi. Ninth, Wendlinger. 10th is Capelli. And they've got to do something about that car. They can't just go on the whole race like this, leaving the Williams stranded in the middle of the circuit. And there will be a big discussion going on in the stewards now about whether to stop the race or not as Mansell walks in.
Well, he seems to have made a quick recovery anyway. Mansell is all right. We see again now, but it's hard to see exactly what's happened. But you see, he's gone. He's missed the first part of the S. He's gone wide on the first part. He's cut right across ahead of Senna, and he's gone off where he was actually turning right. We haven't got a good angle or a clear view of what happened or why, what prompted Mansell to go off. But the good news is, although he sat in the car for a bit, he's clearly all right. He was moving perfectly all right in the pit road then. But as Murray was saying, as Berger's having a look down the inside of his team leader, Ayrton Senna, and Berger does not have to respect any team leadership situation. There's no official 1 and 2 in the McLaren team, and Berger looks as if he wants to set out and win this race.
And they're both closing up on, I think it's Thierry Boutsen, and we've got the usual situation here. If the man in front doesn't move over and let them through, there could be a change of position. So Gerhard Berger, who has only won one race in the time that he's been with McLaren, and that was by default when Ayrton Senna moved over in Japan and let him through on the very last corner. We're with Schumacher.
And courtesy of Schumacher's camera then, it looked to me as if they'd moved Mansell's car up against the pit wall there, and so at least it's in a safer place. And I don't suppose they'll find it very easy to move it now. If they haven't got a crane, they're going to have to leave it there.
Nothing stays the same. It's Christian Fittipaldi, and that off is Ivan Capelli. Well, Ivan Capelli has had an enormous amount of criticism in the Ferrari team lately from the press of Italy. Now, this is what happened. Replay coming up, I suspect. Yes, Ivan Capelli runs wide, goes straight into the wall. Hopefully he's okay, belted tightly into the Ferrari. But yet again, the Italian, driving in his first year for Ferrari, is out. Ayrton Senna is coming up to lap a lot of people. One of them I just saw was the Ligier as it disappeared out of the right side of the picture. So that will be Thierry Boutsen or Eric Comas, who started in 20th and 21st positions on the grid and have now been caught by the 6 leaders. So that's Stefano Modena in the Jordan Yamaha, who is being engulfed by the leaders. Olivier Grillard is there as Senna. Now, if we only get a shot where we can see them go through, Senna is up now with Stefano Modena and goes past him. We know that Maurizio Gugelmin is already out of the race in the second Jordan Yamaha. Now it's Berger who will be taking the Jordan Yamaha, and Senna, as ever, when they see that distinctive red and white shape with the equally distinctive yellow helmet on the top of it, it's like they used to say that when people saw a Rolls Royce coming up behind them, they moved over. Well, exactly the same thing happens when the Grand Prix drivers see Ayrton Senna. There's a sort of instinctive reflex to jink the car sideways and let the Brazilian through. Well, now he's got the toughest one of all, Olivier Grillard, in front of him. There is the Frenchman in the white and blue Tyrrell. That is car number 3. Here they are, Gilles and Senna out of the hairpin. And then he's got to get in front of Pierluigi Martini in the Dallara. No, I tell a lie, it's JJ Leto. And still Gilles as they wave the blue flags, which means move over, Sunshine. Someone wants to pass you. Sunshine is Gilles and someone is Ayrton Senna, and he's done it. So Senna passes Gilles. Now what about Berger? Now the next one is JJ Leto in the Dallara Ferrari for Ayrton Senna on lap 30 out of 69 in the Canadian Grand Prix, and he's leading now by 1.2 seconds, or was. No change. Now everybody else has got the same problem that Senna and Berger had, getting past the tail enders. And it could be that if Riccardo Patrese puts a wheel wrong, he hasn't yet, as Martin Brundle passes Gilles, that there could be a change for third, fourth or fifth places. Senna, you're watching him, leads, 3 times world champion. Berger. Now the next man is Pierluigi Martini, and Martini is in 18th position. So Senna on lap 30 has lapped everybody up to the 18th position. Is Leto. Leto moves over, and then he moves over to the other side and lets Berger through, who closes right up on the rear wing of Ayrton Senna. And this is just as much a race between Ayrton Senna and Gerhard Berger in McLarens as it is between Schumacher and Brundle in Benettons. Each wants to beat his teammate more than anybody else in the race. 42 minutes of this race, which will last about an hour and 38 minutes, perhaps a little less, as Senna, Berger. Now they're coming up to Wendlinger, or is it Belmondo? It's Belmondo, who is number 17. Belmondo is in 15th position.
Yes, and these are moments of high stress for the drivers up at the front of the field. They've got to thread their way through the traffic. It's an opportunity, Berger putting pressure on Senna, and Senna won't be expecting Berger to be kind to him. If Senna makes any tactical error there, and Berger is not going to hold back if he's given a chance. He will go through and take the lead, and then Senna will have to fight it back from him. And Berger's car is certainly looking to be working very well. He seems to be able to hold Senna easily, which probably means if he went past, he'd be able to pull away. And Berger, I'm sure, is well aware of that. And Patrese is having to thread his way through. So now there was a big gaggle of cars. Senna has now got past them all. He's now on a clear track. The others behind him have still got to deal with it. Patrese's through as well.
Now the last thing I would accuse Ayrton Senna of is loitering in Canada, but as I said earlier on, his comparative slowness is demonstrated by the fact that the Benettons have closed right up again with Riccardo Patrese in third position. You are looking now at Gianni Morbidelli in the Minardi Lamborghini. As 1, 2, 3, 4, they come round together with Martin Brundle just a couple of cars' lengths behind Schumacher in fifth position. And picking up on what James was saying a few moments ago, absolutely so about Riccardo Patrese, who has 4 second places as Gerhard Berger has a go at Ayrton Senna. And Riccardo Patrese has 4 second places this season out of 6 races so far. And he finished second here in Canada last year. And this tremendously experienced Italian has got magnificent machinery, of course, in the Williams.
And he was having a look at Berger then at the hairpin, but Berger saw him coming and made it clear that he was going to block him. But Patrese certainly was making a challenge there. And there is Nigel Mansell back in his in Mufti. And very disappointed man, and that was his friend Derek Alsop with him.
Still only 5 retirements, which amazes me because we are now over half distance in Canada. Last year there were 17 retirements. Is this one? It's Herbert coming in I've spoken too soon. Johnny Herbert rolling into the pits. He doesn't look as though he's under power to me, in which case, sadly, the Englishman is out of the Canadian Grand Prix, which means to say that his teammate Mika Häkkinen in the twin Lotus 107 will move up into 6th position on the leaderboard in the World Championship points. A fair way now behind the leading 5, Senna, Berger, Patrese, Schumacher and Martin Brundle. Down to the hairpin, this is lap 36.
Yes, and that would lend support to the suggestion that Herbert had some sort of mechanical problem for a few laps, because he suddenly started to drop slowly away from the leading group. So he'll be, on the one hand, he'll be disappointed, but on the other, he will be mightily encouraged.
Now, just put yourself in the driving seat with any one of these 5 leading drivers. They have, roaring away behind them at about 13,000 RPM, an engine developing close on 800 horsepower these days, be it V12, V10 or V8. They are driving on the absolute limits of adhesion, and there is Mika Häkkinen. Häkkinen coming in now. Oh, what an awful race for Lotus after it had started so well with Johnny Herbert running 6th and 7th. Johnny Herbert out on lap 36 and Mika Häkkinen out on lap 37 apparently, and that means to say that Jean Alesi comes up onto the leaderboard in the Ferrari by default, because drive his heart out though he may, and he's certainly doing that, I can promise you. Jean Alesi's equipment is just not up to it, and Mika Häkkinen comes into the pit lane to join his teammate Johnny Herbert in retirement. But in the process, the first 36 laps or so in Canada, they've demonstrated that that Lotus 107 is jolly nearly as quick as the Benettons, the McLarens and the Williams. It's got a lot of potential. They're working on active suspension for it, which was tested in Monaco, and it will do better during the rest of the season. But the leaders now are coming up again on at least one other driver to lap him, with the potential of being slowed up. And I was saying, just think of it, some 800 horsepower behind them. They're driving on the absolute limits of adhesion, trying to catch and get past the man in front, trying to stop the man behind them from getting past. There is Jean Alesi in 6th position, chased by Karl Wendlinger in the virtually sponsor-less march in a magnificent 7th place, underlining the Germans' quality. I say again, I think, and that's a McLaren. That's been put now. Which one was it? It was Senna. Senna has been passed. Berger leads, Patrese 2nd, and Ayrton Senna is out of the Canadian Grand Prix. Amazing. So this will make no difference in the championship to the gap between Nigel Mansell and Ayrton Senna, and Canada has again been unlucky for Ayrton Senna, who has retired on 2 previous occasions.
And that was a very sudden slow-up by Senna, either, I would think, some form of transmission failure or a major engine blow-up, because he stopped, he just pulled out absolutely instantly. Then from the lead, so Gerhard Berger takes over the lead, and this will further encourage Riccardo Patrese.
I have said several times this afternoon already, I say again, this Canadian circuit is a car breaker. Only 9 cars finished last year. We now have 8 retirements, including Mansell and Senna. Now, here's a replay. Let's see what happens. Where with Schumacher, in front of us is Patrese. There is Senna suddenly pulling out. Berger taking the lead. Patrese goes up into 2nd position. And there is Ayrton Senna touring home. Well, that was a replay, and he's now stopped on the circuit, and all of a sudden the race is transformed. The possibility of Gerhard Berger winning a race himself. I don't mean that unkindly. He won in Japan his sole victory for McLaren because Senna gave it to him. But now McLaren leads, Williams 2nd, Benetton 3rd, Benetton 4th, Ferrari 5th, and magnificent, the March Ilmore of Karl Wendlinger is in 6th position. 2 Germans in the top 6, with an Austrian leading, Gerhard Berger, an Italian 2nd,
Berger seems to really be putting the hammer down, because the moment Senna went, he actually, before they got into the traffic, he pulled away from Patrese a little bit on that lap. And he always looked as if he had a fair bit of speed over Senna, given a clear run. That's a view from Brundle's car. Now we've jumped into Schumacher. No, we haven't, still in Brundle, beg your pardon. Oh, Brundle's got past. Brundle is through.
Martin Brundle, here is a replay of the Englishman. You can see his distinctive helmet in the driving mirror of the Benetton as Michael Schumacher touches the Minardi and runs wide, and through goes Martin Brundle, who is therefore now up into third position. Well, there he is. There's Martin Brundle. We're with Schumacher here. Martin Brundle is third. So, deep breath. Berger leads. There he is. Number 2. 32 de la fin, 30 laps to the end of the race, with Patrese now dropping back as Gerhard Berger really sprints away. Patrese second, Martin Brundle a magnificent third, and on his own merits he is... And there's a blow-up, Is that Wendlinger's Ilmore? Yes. He's slowed... So here is Patrese coming towards us as Martin Brundle, now third, closes up on Pierluigi Martini in the Minardi Dallara, who sometimes has exemplary manners on the circuit and sometimes is extremely bad-mannered and holds people up. Well, he hasn't done it now, because through goes Martin Brundle up into third position. There, now that's Martini in front of us in the Dallara Ferrari. We're with Michael Schumacher, who is in fourth position. Fifth is Jean Alesi. In sixth position, it is Wendlinger, who is running. And the whole complexion of the Canadian Grand Prix has changed on lap 41 out of 69, with Berger leading, Patrese second, Brundle third.
Yes, Schumacher certainly looks fired up. We didn't really get a clear view of how he came to get tangled up with the back marker then, but one would suspect a bit of inexperience and suspect that he's a little bit cross with himself. And Brundle took the opportunity well, because he was presented with a very small gap to squeeze through, and he had to go for it, but go for it he did, and he will be extremely pleased to have got himself in front. Third place for Martin Brundle. Now, Berger is holding Patrese away quite well, and Patrese is not hauling him in as we might expect. This is Alesi's cockpit by the look of it. Ferrari steering wheel is quite recognisable there. And a new fastest lap for Berger, so Berger has really been able to speed up now that Senna's gone, and Patrese is, first of all, we've got to see whether Patrese can actually stay with him. There's some frenzied activity with Morbidelli in the pits.
In the Minardi Lamborghini, Gianni Morbidelli, who was in 12th position as he sprints out, and we're with Michael Schumacher. Now, for the first time in 42 laps, we're on lap 42 now, things are getting just very, very slightly spread out. Gerhard Berger must be all of a second as Ayrton Senna watches the development of the race. Gerhard Berger must be all of a second ahead of Riccardo Patrese, and that's a long time in the race that we've had so far. And there is Brundle pulling away from Schumacher, so the Benettons are third and fourth, and that will be a big help to them in the Constructors' Championship, and it will potentially move them back into second place, because there's only one McLaren running now, and it's the leader, Gerhard Berger. There he is, followed by Patrese and Brundle.
Yes, so we've got a clear track for the two leaders now, so we'll get a proper idea. This is the second clear lap they've had. They're just competing. We'll get a clear idea and just who can go away, and Berger has done yet another fastest lap. And Berger is marginally pulling away from Riccardo Patrese. Now there is a turn up for McLaren. Now this is the first time we've seen on straight speed in the race, McLaren actually going away from a Williams this season, or anybody going away from a Williams this season, to put it like that. and this is indeed a turn-up. So, at the moment, Berger, since they've had clear laps, we've only had a couple of them, but Berger is actually pulling away, and there's another tyre stop. Now, tyre stops were not scheduled for this race. People were trying to go through without, and we're past half distance and past the optimum time, as Briard that was, who just exiting the pits there. But it'll be interesting, because if people are running into tyre problems at this stage of the race, that's very awkward. It leaves people in a tremendous dilemma, as Berger appears to have pulled away even a little bit more, but it'll catch people in a dilemma whether to try and hang on with what they've got if they are in a bit of tyre trouble, or whether to go for a change. And if you're going to go for a change, the sooner you do it, the better in these circumstances, in order to get the better use out of the fresh set.
Lap 43, Berger leads, Patrese second, Brundle third, Schumacher is in fourth position, fifth behind Schumacher is Alesi, sixth is Carl Wendley. So, what sort of a chap is Gerhard Berger, the race leader, the Austrian, who comes from Virgil, lives in Monaco? Well, physically he's tall. That's been one of his problems in the past, because last season, to some extent, and in 1990, his problem was that he was so tall, and he's pulled right away now. From where's Riccardo Patrese? Riccardo Patrese seems to have dropped right back as Alesi goes through. Well, that is Jean Alesi in fifth position in the Ferrari. The producer, for some reason, is concentrating on him all of a sudden. I wouldn't mind a look. In fact, I'd love a look at what's happening at the front of the race instead of the Armco and Alesi.
And certainly Patrese seems to have dropped back by a large amount. Yes, and Patrese, I think, is in trouble, because Brundle is saying yes, and Patrese is very much in trouble because he's slowed right down. Patrese is up for retirement and coasting towards the pits if he even makes it that far. And so Martin Brundle in second place, first the McLaren, second Brundle, who has just put up a new fastest lap. So Brundle may well be ready to give chase to the McLaren of Gerhard Berger, and into the pits goes Patrese, and that looks pretty terminal at the speed he's going.
What an incredible development. Both Williams out, one of the McLarens out, the other McLaren that's left is leading, and Riccardo Patrese is clearly out of the raceway with Martin Brundle. We're about to take second place with him in the Canadian Grand Prix now, as we go past Riccardo Patrese's broken Williams Renault. Out of the car gets the Italian. No points for Williams in Canada, no points for Mansell, no points for Patrese, but what about Gerhard Berger here? Look at the lead he's got. All of a sudden he's got a massive lead, because this is lap 45, 69 lap race, and I was saying that Berger's problem was that he was too tall for the car in previous seasons. Well, McLaren have put that right now, and as an individual he's probably one of the most liked men in Formula One. He's got a fantastic sense of humour, and amongst his hobbies is ice hockey. He runs a haulage business, and a very successful one in Australia, and he's certainly hauling his McLaren round in terrific style now. But Martin Brundle is not higher than he's ever been in a Grand Prix, because he's run second in a Grand Prix before in his early days, but he's the highest he's been this season since he joined Benetton from Jaguar as the ex-sports car world champion of 1988. Martin Brundle, second.
Yes, and you've got to point out, Murray, that Gerhard Berger's main hobby is practical joking, and he's an extremely dangerous man to be around when he's exercising his skills at his hobby. But he's been a tremendous fillip to the McLaren team, which, with the relatively austere personality of Ayrton Senna, it's been an extremely good counter to that. He's been tremendous for morale. And hang on, and Martin Brundle. Now Brundle has stopped, and all of a sudden what Murray was saying about this circuit being so hard on cars, particularly transmissions and things like that, and Brundle again out of the race very quickly, no warning, just something that would appear to have snapped, and he must be furious with that. Martin Brundle, his best Grand Prix ever, I would say. Certainly his highest place, and really was looking on course for at least second place here.
Oh, rotten luck for Martin, to put it mildly. And there's now 10 retirements all of a sudden. Tarquini's out, Gasho's out, Mansell's out, Capelli's out, Gugelmin's out, Johnny Herbert's out, Häkkinen's out, Senna's out, Patrese out, Martin Brundle out, and Gerhard Berger comes up to lap Michele Alboreto in the overweight footwork Mugen Honda car. And
Gerhard Berger now 8 seconds clear of Schumacher. So Berger in traffic can afford to take his time a bit with the back markers and take it carefully, and it looks as if he's going to be able to outpace Schumacher, but he'll have to just watch for a few laps first to make sure that Schumacher's, the cause of that gap wasn't the delays as first Patrese slowed and then Brundle slowed in front of Schumacher.
And what is happening behind the Austrian, I hear you asking? Here is the answer. In second place now, it is Michael Schumacher. Up to third in the Ferrari has come Alesi. Up to a magnificent and very well-deserved fourth has come Karl Wendlinger. In fifth, and the first time ever he's been in the points, Ukyo Katayama. There he is, the Japanese driver in the Venturi LaRousse. And in sixth position, it is Andrea De Cesaris. In seventh place, it is Eric Comas, believe it or not, in the Ligier. In eighth position, it is Michele Alboreto in the footwork arrows. Gerhard Berger has lapped everybody up to Alboreto, who is eighth. In ninth position, it is Pierluigi Martini in the Dallara. 10th is his teammate, Leto, who has, of course, been lapped. In 11th position, it is Thierry Boutsen in the second Ligier. In 12th position, it is Gianni Morbidelli. 13th is Christian Fittipaldi. 14th is Griard. And in 15th place, it's Paul Belmondo. So both the marches running. That is Jean Alesi pressing on, forcing on, driving on in the Ferrari in third position. And number 27 carrying that famous name. The best he's finished so far this year is third place. Number 4 is Andrea De Cesaris in the Tyrrell Ilmore, who is in 7th place. He is about to be caught as you look down on the circuit at turn 2, which they exit at about 70 miles an hour, accelerating away through the gears into the right and left-handers of turns 3 and 4, which they are at now, then building up to 140 miles an hour on the sweeping right curve, which leads into the left-handed turn 5 that De Cesaris is at now, up into third gear to fourth, 150 miles an hour here, up into fifth gear, back into third for the right-hander at turn 7, with De Cesaris being caught by Gerhard Berger as they go underneath the Concorde Bridge, swing left up to the Cosmos Bridge, down to the chicane, hard on the brakes from 180 miles an hour, down into first gear, and we're with Michael Schumacher now, second position. Now let's see if we can see Schumacher in the background. Yes, he's behind Alboreto. I just saw him catching the footwork Mugen there. And you can see a lot of rubber crumb on the surface of the course on the outside of the corners as Gerhard Berger laps 7th place. Andrea De Cesaris comes through to complete his 51st lap with 18 to go, including the one he's on now, with the prospect of his first real victory for McLaren to give him 10 points, which ironically and coincidentally would move him back with Ayrton Senna to 18 points, equal in the championship, although what their position would be I don't know until the race is over, because there's a lot of places still to be gained and lost in the Canadian Grand Prix, as Michael Schumacher comes up to catch the Renault-powered Ligier of Frenchman Eric Comas, who is just as disgusted with the car as his teammate Thierry Boutsen is. It's got the Renault engine, but they just cannot get the handling right. And that's Alesi, number 27 in the V12 Ferrari, which for those of you who are interested in the technical aspects, as he changes one of his tear-offs on the visor, has got the longitudinal gearbox and not the transverse gearbox. I know a lot of you wanted to know that. as Alesi goes through now, closing up right up on Pierluigi Martini. The Sicilian catching the Italian. They've both got Ferrari engines. And Jean Alesi has, of course, got the automatic gearbox. Watch his fingers, very distinctive positioning of his hands on the steering wheel, with the rocking levers underneath his right and left hands, feeding on the power, drifting sideways. And so now, lap 53. Berger, 7.3 seconds ahead of Schumacher. And you can see that first position is clearly between those two, because look how far Jean Alesi is behind the second place man, Michael Schumacher. Indeed, there is, I must say, a danger of most of the drivers now, with 10 retirements, settling for where they are.
Yes, up front, Schumacher will certainly continue to do what he can to press Berger, but traffic is a problem. Schumacher is now in that traffic and is actually dropping back because Berger's got a clearer track at the moment, and Schumacher must surely press him to try and push him mechanically, because inexperienced though he is, he will be aware, and he would have been able to see from what's been going on around him, that this circuit is hard on the mechanicals, and therefore if you press the other guy, he's got to press his car in turn, and that can make it break. But really the field is quite spread out, but I have to say, up until now we've had plenty of action, and this has been really one of the more dramatic races in what's been a pretty dull season so far.
Hats off to the man you're watching, Karl Wendlinger, who in the March is in a superb 4th place, the highest he's ever finished in a Grand Prix, and this is his first full season, was 8th position in Spain. He's caught and passed Thierry Boutsen in the Renault-powered Ligier, and Karl Wendlinger, if you get a close look at the car when you next see it on the screen, as now you're looking at Gerhard Berger well in the lead, coming up to catch and lap Ukyo Katayama, the Japanese driver in the Venturi LaRousse. But if you see that march, you'll see it's got names all over it. They are mostly the names of Montreal restaurants, which have chipped in with sponsorship to help the financially strapped March team. Gerhard Berger slowing right down now. His main problem now, Gerhard Berger, although it's one that he will be well equipped to cope with, is maintaining concentration, because there is no obvious threat to him at the present moment. He's some 8 seconds ahead of Schumacher. He's catching and about to take Katayama, but what he's got to do is maintain his pace and make sure that he stays on the island, literally.
Yes, of course, this traffic will keep him sharp, because he's got to find his way through that, and that will keep him on his toes. It's, in a way, more of a problem, Murray, if he's got nobody around and he's all by himself with a big lead, and nobody's to overtake. The back markers at least give him something to do, because they're never easy to pass. So he won't fall asleep for the time being anyway.
Well, now, Gerhard Berger is actually a very, very lucky man to beat in this race, because some years ago, in his Formula 3 days, he was driving his road-going BMW in Austria. He went off the road and hurt himself very badly indeed. And it was his good luck that the car that came along behind him and stopped actually contained 2 of Austria's leading surgeons, and Berger had injured his neck very badly, and if it wasn't for them and them knowing the correct treatment, there is little doubt that Gerhard Berger would not be with us now. But he recovered magnificently, went on to do well in Formula 3, and in Formula 1, where he started with ATS, he's driven for Arrows as well. He won a race for Benetton, the Mexican Grand Prix. Then he won 4 races for Ferrari before joining McLaren, with the misfortune of having as his teammate Ayrton Senna. And I say the misfortune not because the 2 of them don't get on well together, but because Ayrton Senna is probably the most daunting man in Formula 1 to have as your teammate. So what's happened to all the big men in this race? Well, Nigel Mansell out on lap 16 when, for a reason we still don't know, he lost the Williams, spun out on the left-hander after the start and finish. His car was marooned in the middle of the circuit and he's walked away. He walked away looking very unhappy. He's probably done a Manx jig, which he will have learned in the Isle of Man, when he knew that his chief rival, Ayrton Senna, is out of the Canadian Grand Prix. But before that, Johnny Herbert and Mika Hakkinen had retired in their Lotus cars, both from 6th position on successive laps, laps 36 and 37. And then on the very next lap, out went Ayrton Senna. We don't know why. We haven't been given any official information, but it's my guess that something happened in the engine, in the Honda V12 engine. But if I'm maligning it, I apologise now. And Martin Brundle similarly went out from 2nd position after Riccardo Patrese had retired the Williams, and the Canadian Gilles Villeneuve circuit, named after Canada's greatest Grand Prix driver, who achieved his first Grand Prix victory here in a Ferrari in 1978, has proved in 1992, as it has shown itself in the past, to be a real car breaker. But it hasn't broken Jean Alesi's Ferrari, brackets yet, close brackets, because we're on lap 57. There's still 12 laps to go as Michele Alboreto comes up to Eric Comas, and the race order on lap 56 is that Gerhard Berger in the McLaren is leading Michael Schumacher by 6.3 seconds, as you can see. Then Alesi some 32 seconds behind Schumacher, and about 30-odd seconds ahead of Carl Wendlinger in a superb 4th position. Berger has lapped everybody up to Wendlinger. 5th is Katayama, who looks like getting points for the Larousse team again. They got their first point for a very long time indeed at Monaco 2 weeks ago, when Bertrand Gachot finished in 6th position. And in 6th position in the race now is Andrea de Cesaris in the Tyrrell Ilmore, 1 place below his best position. And this is Alboreto and Comas. Alboreto, the veteran Italian ex-Ferrari driver, who has finished 2nd in the World Championship in his career for Ferrari, pushing the now almost totally reliable footwork, because they have finished in race after race this season thanks to the Mugen engine, replacing the Porsche engine, which was such a disappointment for them in 1991. And Michele Alboreto, number 9, is chasing Eric Comas for 7th place. This is the battle on the circuit at the present moment. Eric Comas, who once again has shown his teammate Thierry Boutsen, who is down in 11th position the way round. Boutsen left Williams, not of his own volition, and he went to Ligier, the company, the constructor with one of the biggest budgets in Grand Prix racing. And Eric Comas, an excellent ex-Formula 3000 European champion, has consistently out-qualified and out-raced Thierry Boutsen.
Yes, well, it was the perfect opportunity, really, for Eric Comas, because Boutsen has never been one of the quickest Grand Prix drivers, never been really in the top echelon, but he was a good yardstick. And Comas is a talented driver, and it was perfect. It's the perfect situation for a talented driver to go into a team with an experienced and solid type number 2 that who is nice and beatable. And Comas has taken no time at all to establish himself over Boutsen, and that will do his career no harm, because whilst the Ligier team is not everybody's cup of tea to be driving for, at least he's beating Boutsen, so it shows that he is worth watching.
Gerhard Berger laps Paul Belmondo yet again. Paul Belmondo in the March, and this is only his 3rd Grand Prix. He's finished in both the others he started in, and at the present moment it looks as though he's going to finish in this one as well. We're on lap 59, 69 lap race. It's far from over. There are still going to be some retirements, I forecast, in the Canadian Grand Prix. And with the knowledge that Mansell and Patrese and Brundle, 3 of the top drivers in reliable cars, were out. It's by no means beyond the bounds of possibility that Berger's McLaren Honda would fail to finish the race. Although he's got this comfortable cushion, he'll be driving well with it himself, well within the capabilities of the car. He's on his 60th lap now, and he's just maintaining the gap. Now this is Michael Schumacher coming up to take Belmondo. I couldn't see whether Schumacher was waving his hand to say thank you or shaking his fist to say get out of the way. I think his fingers were clenched, in which case it was the latter. Michael Schumacher, what an amazing young driver he is.
Yes, and it certainly was, and he was not at all pleased, and there we can see it again, and he was most unhappy with that effort by Belmondo. And funny enough, when we talked about Belmondo just now, I spared him, but to say that really he's finished his 2 previous Grand Prix, but he's a renter driver. He paid for his drive, and he really is not in Grand Prix racing on merit or ability. And Schumacher probably feels that he shouldn't be there at all, judging by his little fist wave.
Here's Schumacher. This is his 13th Grand Prix. He has only failed to finish in 3 of them for reasons to do with the car rather than himself. And in all the others, he has finished in the points. 6th, 5th, 4th, 3rd, 2nd. He's 2nd here. He must be regarded as a potential world champion. It's exactly what Germany needed. It's always mystified me that Germany, with some of the finest passenger car constructors in the world, have not produced racing cars and racing drivers, with the exception of Mercedes-Benz, and they retired from Formula One in 1955, although they came back to sports car racing. Well, Schumacher, just as Boris Becker is a hero in Germany for tennis, Michael Schumacher is a hero for Formula One Grand Prix racing. As is Jean Alesi in Italy, of course, and we're looking at him now, 3rd in the Ferrari, pacing it home, because there's no way that Alesi is going to catch Schumacher unless Schumacher has trouble and slows down. There is a massive gap between the Ferrari and the Benetton, and Ferrari, frankly, have got nothing to be very proud about in Canada. Alesi is where he is because other people have broken down in front of him, although as ever he's driving his heart out. And Luca Di Montezemolo, the boss of Ferrari, has said our engine isn't good enough, our chassis isn't good enough, we're trying hard, and so is Schumacher. He's coming up now to lap the Christian Fittipaldi, who is the youngest driver in the race, 21 years old, getting Grand Prix experience. This is his 7th race. He's qualified for every Grand Prix that he's tried to take part in, and has subsequently taken part in, of course, this year. And at a very early age, he's building up excellent experience, backed by ex-Grand Prix father Wilson Fittipaldi, supported by 3 times world champion Emerson Fittipaldi. And this is Eric Comas going through and taking Belmondo, who must be getting dizzy now with the number of cars that are flashing past him. And Comas has still got Michele Alboreto tucked up behind him as we ride with Schumacher.
Yes, and clearly Alboreto was trying to take advantage of the confusion that Belmondo was either causing or certainly potentially causing, having a go. So that was a little fraught moment for Comas, who's trying to defend that 7th place. Yes, and Christian Fittipaldi, who is certainly bred for Grand Prix racing because his uncle, Emerson Fittipaldi, double world champion back in the 70s, and his father, Wilson Fittipaldi, a good middle-order Formula One Grand Prix driver at the same time. And Christian Fittipaldi was the Formula 3000 champion last year, and one thing he's certainly shown is that the breeding has given him an outstandingly good racing brain, just like his uncle in particular and his father Wilson as well. But He did it probably more by brain power than blinding speed, and certainly in the previous season in Formula 3 he was comprehensively outpaced by Mika Hakkinen, who we've already talked about today as one of the great Formula 3 drivers. And he has, whilst he's been solid and he's qualified well, he's got a good job done, he really hasn't been fantastically quick in the Minardi team, and that would be consistent with his Formula 3 form.
You're watching Gerhard Berger leading the Canadian Grand Prix by 9 seconds on lap 63 with 6 laps to go, including the one that he is on now. And let's look at what this is going to do to the World Championship. Well, Nigel Mansell has been lucky and unlucky. He's been unlucky because he had to retire. He's been lucky because both Patrese and Senna have had to retire, and off goes Ukyo Katayama. That's another retirement. That is the 11th retirement, and that means to say there is a change. Well, it's not a retirement yet because he's still in the pit lane, but it means to say that now up into 5th position will come Andrea De Cesaris, and up into 6th position behind De Cesaris will come Eric Comas, and there is the reason. The Lamborghini engine has decided that 62 laps of the... Oh, and not only that, but fire in the ship as well.
Yes, a nice spectacular blow-up, and believe you me, that'll do his popularity in Japan no harm at all. They love all that. The Japanese, they like the drama of Grand Prix racing. A Japanese driver who doesn't crash has got no chance of a career, and if he can't crash, something like that's a pretty good substitute. So Berger.
Well, the most significant thing in the race at the present moment is the fact that Eric Comas in the Ligier has moved up into 6th place. Means that for the first time in decades almost, and I exaggerate, Ligier is in the points, and if Comas stays there, that 1 point would make all the difference to Ligier in terms of whether the team has to pre-qualify at the end of the season or not. That's the diminutive Katayama, who looks as though he's not big enough or strong enough to suck up liquid through a straw when he's not in his overalls, but when he's in a car, my goodness, he certainly changes, and he's out of the car now, out of the race. Bitter luck, but now Gerhard Berger is pacing the car home, his McLaren Honda. He's on lap 65, so he's got 4 laps to go at the end of the one that he's on now, as has Michael Schumacher on his way to a 2nd place again in 1992. And I was talking about the World Championship. Nigel Mansell would still be leading Riccardo Patrese by 28 points, notwithstanding the fact that they've both retired. Schumacher would be on 26 points if he finishes 2nd and would be in 3rd position. Gerhard Berger would be tying with Ayrton Senna for 4th position. So there would be very little change in the World Championship, except that, of course, another race would have been completed, the 7th out of 16. And as far as Nigel Mansell's World Championship hopes are concerned, that has to be good. Another race gone, no change in his championship lead. And frankly, I think the gap between McLaren Honda and Williams Renault, whilst it may have been eroded a little, has not been eroded enough to make a dramatic difference in terms of the potential winning capability of the Williams team in future races. But you watch Michael Schumacher, he is on lap 66, the man from Cologne, ex-Mercedes-Benz sports car team driver, won in Mexico last year. Down comes Fittipaldi, chased by Wendlinger. Well, I hope and pray that Carl Wendlinger can keep his March Ilmore running, because that will give them 3 vital points, which would not only help them in terms of pre-qualifying, but would help them get the sponsorship that they richly deserve. It is by no means a foregone conclusion, incidentally, that there's going to be pre-qualifying much longer, because the Andrea Moda team, of which most of you will have never heard, failed to pre-qualify again in Canada, and it may well not be taking part in future Grand Prix or trying to, in which case there would only be 4 cars over the 26 that are allowed to start, and pre-qualifying would not have to happen. Lap 67. So at the end of this lap, just 5.5 miles to go, as Eric Comas still ahead of Michele Alboreto in 7th position. There is the Italian, and Michele trying very, very hard indeed, having had 2 5th places and a 6th place this year. If he could get ahead of Comas, that he's battled with before this season, it would give the Footwork Mugen team a point. But Eric Comas, knowing that if he gets a point for Ligier, it would be the first point they had had for 48 races. I say again, 48 races. Will be doing everything he can to keep Alboreto behind him. Schumacher, 2nd place, coming through to complete his 67th lap, which he does now, just crosses the line. And on the penultimate lap now, lap 68 out of 69, 2 tours to the end, 2 laps to the end. Berger leads by an increased margin on his way to his first real Grand Prix victory. I say that with no disrespect to Gerhard Berger. He's had 5 wins before, 4 of them for Ferrari, 1 of them for Benetton. He's proved richly that he could do it, except for the obstacle of Ayrton Senna. Well, that obstacle has been removed. Berger was snapping at the gearbox of his teammate for lap after lap, and out goes Christian Fittipaldi to make that 12 retirements out of the 26 starters. Venez ici avec moi, with the fire extinguisher. I will show you how to use it when I've found out. And he fires it at the gearbox at the back of the car, and the brakes, I suspect his brakes were overheating. And Gerhard Berger, he's maintained his concentration. The Honda has run true for the whole race. The chassis is handling well, and Gerhard Berger starts his 69th and last potentially victorious lap in Canada. I was going on like this about Nigel Mansell this time last year, and look what happened to him, but I don't think it's going to happen to Berger.
No, and I'm sure Berger will remember that. And a good win for Berger. He's driven extremely well. He was really quick in the race when he got on Senna's tail. He was really pushing, and certainly he's was probably as fast as anyone on the track. He pulled away from Patrese when he had the chance, and a well-deserved victory for Gerhard Berger. But for Nigel Mansell, what appears to have been a mistake, he went off the road. We don't know for sure. It may have been something wrong with the car, but for him, in a way, a good result. He went out of the race, but his nearest rivals, Riccardo Patrese, his biggest threat, and Ayrton Senna, just about an equally big threat, both went out of the race with mechanical trouble, and that handed, for that Mansell has kept his lead in the championship and got 1 race closer to the end of it.
As Gerhard Berger is almost within the sight of the checkered flag for his 7th Grand Prix victory, his 2nd for McLaren, having won for Ferrari and Benetton, and this time he wins convincingly on his own, and we're watching Michael Schumacher in 2nd position, and Gerhard Berger has won the Canadian Grand Prix. 10 points for him, 10 points for McLaren.
It was quite hard because in the beginning I was on 4th position, but I could go quicker, but it was impossible to overtake. And so it was a question of discipline to wait a little bit. And as we could see, the others start to try very hard to overtake, and it's very difficult here. So I just wait until some things happen, and then as I was behind Ayrton, I really was quite a bit quicker than him and was nearly impossible to overtake him. And then in the same moment when he gets problems, I get also gearbox problems. I had a big problem on the gearbox, and I had to change my way to drive. I couldn't change any more the gears on the button. I had to change it by hand, and honestly I had to learn it. It took me about 10 laps to understand how to do it, and then it was fine. Then everything was fine. The car had no problem, and the tires was on the limit. I was once in the middle of the race thinking to change tires because I was sliding so much. But it didn't get worse, and so it went everything well until the end.
The situation was that he was as well behind Patrese, and therefore he couldn't go quicker as he won. And I was as well behind him and couldn't go quicker. I think in the end when Gerhard got less fuel in and I had not so much fuel advantage and weight advantage, he was just a bit quicker and I couldn't hold him. And the last 10 laps, I really didn't try it because I want to finish as second. And I know even if I would close to Gerhard, I knew I wouldn't able to pass him, and therefore I decided to stay and just finish my race.
It was very difficult, especially at the beginning, because with the full tanks, the car was touching in fast corners. So to be honest, I had just to wait and to follow the other cars. And laps after laps, the car was getting much better, and that's it. I had nothing to. I drove the car just like a taxi, you know, just
some taxi
at 98% because everybody was quicker than me.
Still the same line now?